Hello and welcome everybody. It's Colette from the Sacred Rose Temple, and I'm here for another installment of Women as the Living Myth. This is a series where we're looking beneath the biography of women into the deeper archetypal story, really, of how women choose to live and the myth that they live. In these conversations, we will explore story, thresholds, archetypes, feminine power, symbology, and the medicine that women's lives offer to all of us. And today I am really happy and excited to be joined by Madeleine Eames, and we will be exploring not only what she has done, but what she has become and indeed is becoming. So lovely to have you on this podcast, Madeleine. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Colette. I'm excited for our conversation about myth and stories.
Yeah, great. So, Madeleine, I'm going to give you a little bio about her. So, she's been working in the field of mental health for over 3 decades, and she's run a very busy practice as a psychotherapist, specialized in healing trauma, chronic pain, and has created one of the world's largest online pain programs in Canada during COVID. The approach she used were varied as a yoga teacher, breathwork facilitator, and a mindfulness guide. But it wasn't until her burnout in 2020 that she met Mary Magdalene and she started to unearth the myths and the stories of the architecture that drove her underlying conditioning. This was a turning point that turned into a course called Breaking the Feminine Code and a book being released this summer, which I'm excited about, called Resurrect the Magdalene Tower. What a biography. So honored to have you here, Madeleine. So I want to
Thank
start off
you.
with the obvious thing. I think we spoke about it before we started to come into this space, the tower. Tell me,
Mhm.
first of all, about Magdalene's Tower.
Mhm. Well, it's really interesting. The tower priestess or the tower archetype sort of fell into my lap, and it wasn't until I really explored, as you pointed out, during that period of burnout, looking at the architecture of my life. In other words, the architect, the archetype that had been unconsciously running my life, that I ended up in a course with Sarah Bertrand, who I absolutely love, around the Magdalene Tower and the tower archetype, which was actually a reclaiming of the Magdalene Tower, the tower priestesses, who we have, hints of in fairy tales. In the princess in the tower, who's usually a damsel in distress, waiting to be rescued by the knight in shining armor, or trying to escape somehow, usually held by somebody in there, as a prisoner. And also the tarot card, the tower card, that it wasn't until I was into this journey that I remembered when I was 17, and I had gone to a tarot reader and she pulled the tower card, and I had no idea. I just loved stuff like that, like fortune telling. And she pulled the tower card and I was like, oh my God, this woman, this being tossed out of the tower. So chaos, ruin, destruction. And she said to me, don't worry, a man will come into your life and save you. And that became the story. Little did I know that it was all code written like the rose for this tower priestess who she wasn't a prisoner in a tower. She owned the tower. Ooh, just got chills. She owned the tower, and she governed from a place of authority. She held the wealth for the land, and she was the one that the kings consulted with. And when I went on this journey, the tower journey, something ignited in me in it, and I'm no word of a lie. It wasn't until I was halfway through that I realized that my name is Magnificent Tower. Madeline, the Magdalene. Okay. And so in I started to breathe life into building my structure that can hold boundaries, can hold money, can hold wealth and power. And that is really the structure that I saw so many women in my trauma therapy practice lacking. The boundaries, not being able to make money, can't hold themselves in difficult conversations like a tower. So that's a little bit about the archetype.
A little bit, like a little bit opening up. This has got all my juices flowing. It really has, because your story here is medicine for the myth. It really is what I'm super interested in. And I think when you shared about the tower, where we sold it as Disney, as that place where the feminine was captured, but in Jungian analysis, we look at it as exactly as you describe it, that place, that structure that she can break free, and she doesn't own the tower. This is amazing, amazing stuff. So I want to ask you, it's very Jungian question, in fact, to ask, what myth do you feel that you've been living? Which myth do you most closely relate to? Is it that of the Magdalene, or was it one of the stories as a child of the tower? Which myth do you feel that you've been most closely living?
Mm. Well, the story or the myth of my life before realizing this, yeah. Well, it was a myth. It was a story that I did not write. It wasn't my own. It wasn't the story. It was a story that I was, like many, many women, I was born into. The story or the myth of the damsel in distress, the good girl archetype. And it wasn't until I met Mary Magdalene, when I took myself on this solo trip to France, that I really started to see this clearly, that often women, and myself included, have this idea that I'm not living the life that I'm supposed to, but they can't see a way out. And so the good girl archetype is the one that we've all learned. And I wasn't brought up in a church, I wasn't brought up in religion, but I really started to see how that programming had affected me physically, my health, my wealth, my emotional well being. And I also saw immediately that the women that I had been sitting with, in counseling for so many years, at the root of so much that they experienced was this belief, this of unworthiness, of not good enough, of the good girl. I'm just not good enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not whatever enough. I'm not a good enough mother. I'm not a perfect mother. And so the work the interesting thing is the work that I have been doing is helping them to regulate their nervous system, to create boundaries, to live with a little bit more ease, but still within the cage of the good girl. Let's make this cage a little bit more comfortable for you. And fair enough, we all need to feel safe and have a bit more ease. But Mary Magdalene, like, broke that cage door open for me and said, like, that's not a real that's not the story. That was not the original story.
I
Yeah.
love that, breaking the cage open, because that is so succinct with the idea in myth that there's always this threshold initiation moment. Would you say that was a threshold initiation moment? And what did that feel like? Women, the language you're using is so great for women to place themselves in those situations. So can you describe the threshold, the initiation, what that felt like, and how you broke through it?
Yeah. I'll First of all, what I'll say is that it's it's scary because you don't know what's outside of the cage. Nobody has in my lifetime shown me what's outside of the cage door. So it's a bit of a trip into the unknown. And I think the moment that really, well, first of all, I had to experience burnout, or I never would have slowed down. I wouldn't have. And so in that period, I started to, because there was a couple of moments, I suppose. One was the realization one day that I was in burnout, and it took me a while. And what I realized on that day when I woke up after sleeping for 4 hours, sleeping through client meetings, and I still didn't feel rested, I came to the realization that, okay, what I have been treating so many women for over the years happened to me out of the blue. How did that happen? And that was a real turning point because I thought this is largely unconscious. And I think, from that moment forward, I started excavating beliefs. Whose story am I living in? Why can't I rest? Why the obligation, the putting other people before me, the taking responsibility for other people's emotions. It was everything that I'd seen in my office, but I didn't know that it also pertained to me. So that was kind of the first threshold. I thought, okay, well, something really deep needs to shift here. And synchronicity, one after another, led me to a solo pilgrimage to France, to Mary Magdalene, and where I met her on the second threshold moment was on the beach at Saint-Marie de la Mer. And as usual, I was rushing. I was like going back to my car, and it was raining, and I was like onto Montségur is my next stop, and let's go. And I was, if any of your listeners have been there on the beach, it's quite it's quite rocky, and there's a rocky rock wall. And I was kind of walking quickly along the rock wall, and my leg slid in between two rocks, and it was stuck. And I was stuck. So just like burnout, it's like, there's no choice here. And I was by myself. I kind of needed my legs to be able to drive. And it was in that moment when I could not move and there was nobody else around that Mary Magdalene spoke to me. And the words I heard were, "What you hide has been hidden from you." And I heard them loud and clear in the waves, in the wind. And that unraveled that was really the beginning of writing this book, Resurrect the Magdalene Tower, because I realized that none of us are at fault here. There's nothing to be ashamed of. What we don't know, what we hide inside of ourselves, is what was hidden from us. To be wealthy, to be greedy, to have desire, to be angry, to be free and experience pleasure. Nobody I'm speaking for myself. In general, nobody shows us those things, which happen to correspond with the 7 deadly sins. And I pulled out my journal and I started writing, stuck in the rock. And I eventually got my leg out. And there I basically downloaded the blueprint for the book.
It's crazy, isn't it? That heroine's journey is that the language is the same when we look at it through analysis. It's that place where you cannot move, you are completely stuck, and you've got to face it. You've got to face it. And there's something opens, isn't there? I had a very similar experience with the Black Madonna at Shark Cathedral, where I was kind of in the same situation. Her voice came to me very clear. And this is where a body of work of mine was developed as well. It feels in the sisterhood, all of these stories feel very similar. We all link up with very similar stories. And you had to leave, it sounds very numinous and very lovely. But I know that place, it asks a lot of you. You have to leave stuff behind that you've been holding on to for security. So we might make this sound glamorous when people see us on podcasts or But I know what you've been through. I know how difficult it was for you in that moment to have to leave the old version of you behind and to face the new version of you. And the language you used, I hope people wrote the words down that you used about courage and boundaries and all of these things. Tell me, what did you, by leaving the old you behind at that point, probably on the rock at Saint-Marie de la Mer, what did you then have to face after you decided, I can't do this anymore, I need to go a different way? What did you face?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I still had, a few weeks on my trip to really kind of digest this once I got myself unlodged from the rock and kept going. And what I really found was that as I sat with this more and more and thought about all the ways that I had learned to be good, I I started to just let go of a lot of the rules, like slowly one by one. The rule that I couldn't rest, that I had to prove all the ways that I tried to prove my worth because of this feeling of unworthiness and of not good enough, and really started to just open up to the possibility in those micro moments, those like small choices that I started to make. Because there's a big part of myself and also so many women that I know that we don't necessarily want to blow up our life and just walk away. And sometimes that happens, just leave the fire burning behind you. Fair enough. But so for me, it was more of a step by step. Started having dreams of, I started having dreams of towers and towers collapsing, towers being blown up, towers. And this image of the tower priestess came to me as a lioness. So I not only started breaking down or disintegrating who I thought I should be, I started embodying more of the qualities that I felt from this lioness that kept visiting me. And so it was a kind of, for me, it was a bit of both. Has it been easy? No. No, because in those moments where it's just a simple boundary, it's a simple no, the good girl, she does not want to let go of that overnight because it feels very unsafe. Feel unsafe and guilty. And so feeling unsafe and guilty became my best friends because every time that happened, I knew that it was okay. There's something new emerging. So that's kind of the way that it went for me. And that was a number of years ago, and I started creating more. I started writing more. So for your listeners, I would say during those periods of time to really breathe life into what you now are creating. And the old tends to sometimes disintegrate on its own.
I think that's so wise, an activity, I do this with women too, to say, know who the nice, good girl is. How does she behave? What are her actions? Like, what are your own self-ingested rules that you make? This is so stuck in us, isn't it? I know with myself, like this rule book I had and had to burn and break was incredibly large, like incredibly large, and still is. That's still work in progress, of course. And what you were saying about the lovely analogy of taking that change step by step. I'm really a bad advocate of that. I'm a kind of blow it up, set it on fire, walk away. And maybe that scares a lot of women. But there is the other part that you say is that knowing what you've got to change and making those small daily steps, or at least being conscious of what needs to change, you're already halfway there, aren't you? So change can begin to happen once you're in some awareness of it. I mean, I think many of us have been blind to how conditioned we have become as women to being good and nice and dutiful and all of those things. So I think that's a heroic act in itself to break free
Yeah.
from those rigid ways of living and being. And in fact, all the heroines in every myth, in every goddess we find, she's a rule breaker. She breaks rules. She goes against her own rule book. And that leads me to the question for you. When we're talking about archetypes, and you've mentioned so many already, the listeners have got this quiz that they can go through as they listen to this podcast, identifying the archetypes as they come out. And you've already gone through loads. But I wonder which archetype you identify with the most and why.
Mm, gosh. I would say, well, the ones that are coming to mind right now are like the wise woman or the queen archetype. And I love that you asked that question because as a trauma therapist, sometimes we feel in our lives, well, I've got to fix this or I've got to work on this problem so that I can become the wise woman. And how I work now, it turned 360 by saying, no, become this woman and see what comes up that needs to be healed. Become this archetype and notice what comes up in the way of, and that's what's on your plate to move through, you know? And so a lot of there was some other archetypes in your list that actually came up that I'm not quite remembering now. I don't know if any others are coming to mind, but for you, but the wise woman, yeah,
Yeah, I
you're
mean,
going to
you
say,
said the tower. You use the tower as an archetype, and I was really sat with that because Jung himself said that there's no set rule about archetype. Like we make up archetypes. There's many, there's thousands. I think in modern spirituality, we've tried to box them into certain things. And I know during the conversations that women have come up with these archetypes, and they're like, "Is that an archetype?" Well, you said it is, so of course it is. So
I
yeah, I
love
think
that.
when you said the archetype that I am is the tower priestess, I was like, holy moly. I've been to that tower. I got a huge same, like I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it. I never thought about the tower priestess. Tell us about the
Right?
tower priestess. This might blow people's minds.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to claim that one then from like Sarah Bertrand. Without her like articulating this into being, I and then it was like the Tower Priestess. I mean, every Halloween here in Canada, I dressed up as a princess, and I wanted to be a queen, and I loved fairy tales, and I wanted to sit in my tower. Like there was something that even as I'm talking about it now, it just ignited that story of Rapunzel. But of course, there was something behind there, and and visiting towers. I've always loved towers, tower shapes, trees. The Magdalene towers in the world, the Tower of London. So that archetype really ignites me, absolutely. And when I talk about this, when I'm everybody, you're right. Every woman has their own version of that tower and in themselves. And when I started to really realize for myself what was getting in the way, I mentioned the seven deadly sins. And I started what I do when something really ignites me, I start to teach it. And so that's where I launched this course, Breaking the Feminine Codes, where we actually move through. For me, it's a very much an embodiment journey. It's a journey of embodiment and embracing those emotions. It's a very internal process. It's a very deep feminine descent, first and foremost. So I can see the tower on the horizon. So there I am, I'm looking at it. But I really feel like we need to move in because we've done the moving out. That's what, has created burnout. And we've done that. Okay, I want to be that, so now I'm going to be that. It doesn't work just like that. So that deep descent, which is really what the book is about, into the body, into the roots, into safety, into sloth, which is rest. You can't get anywhere unless you're well rested. Into greed, feed yourself well. Make sure you are well fed at first and foremost, and starting to embrace the emotion of anger, of wrath, of like, what does that feel like in your body? Doesn't mean you have to go and rage at your neighbor, but really for me, I guess I'm so glad that you kind of led me here, because for me, becoming the tower is becoming everything, all the shadows, everything that Jung talks about, all the shadows, becoming every part of me that was held in shadow, all the emotions that I think I'm not supposed to have, that are bad, all embracing all of them and being all of them, so that you have a choice. You don't have to be any of them.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was
I
really my
mean,
journey.
that tower image of the tarot, as you're saying that, is coming in my mind, seeing the tower card, the tarot cards, and it feels angry. It feels like an explosion, doesn't it? It feels like a huge release. And I know that people, when the tarot comes up, when that card comes up in tarot, they actually get very scared of it. And it's actually exactly as you say, it's that huge time of initiation, transformation, and it contains everything. It contains all the elements, good and bad, as we label it, we should say, and all the elements of being a woman that we've had to repress. I know that in studying
Mm.
myth for me has allowed me to accept the parts of me that I hadn't accepted. I've got a really quick anger, very fiery as a person. And I tried to yoga it away. I tried to do loads of things to get rid of these things. And now, studying the archetypal energies of the feminine, I'm just embracing all of those parts, the wrathful part, the dark side of me, all of it, the sexual side of me. It's really allowed me to explore that. And I love the way you use the tower as encompassing it all. I also want to go while you were there, because you were speaking about the anger and the shadow parts. The big part of the myth and looking at the heroine as a woman who you are. What would you say the biggest wound was that you had to overcome, and what was the medicine?
Mm. Yeah. The the biggest wound for me was this sense of unworthiness or inadequacy, that, and when I look back, that resulted in perfectionism, which is very bad for your health. Just to say, the research is there. Like, the having to be perfect underneath there is a wound of unworthiness and shame. And so that was probably the uncovering. The antidote for me is not only the emotional part of it, the emotional wellness and wholeness, and like you said, incorporating all these parts, that the inner good girl, the inner child, all of those things. So there's the modern psychology part, but what I noticed really shifted in my work, and this is what also is part of the antidote, is when I start talking to women about the seven deadly sins, and actually the root in history of where they came from. There is something about that historical piece that I think trauma therapy has largely missed. I think I can see women start to go like, what? What? This is not a real thing that I had to follow. I did because it was safe. And let's face it, if women did step out of line, and still sometimes now in some parts of the world, the penalty is death. And my world, it's more like it's criticism, it's losing people, it's comments on Facebook, all stuff that I can survive. So there's two parts of this as I go back to the roots of the seven deadly sins, how they were ascribed to Mary Magdalene in homily 33. So we actually go through some of the history that I had to learn, and therefore all women. And then we trace how that's followed us because of epigenetics, or because fear does get inherited ancestral trauma throughout generations. Women, and myself included, can start to see, oh, I don't need to do this. This isn't really my story anymore. And it's so free, it's so liberating to realize that it's not, you don't have a problem. Oh, for all your listeners, you are not a problem to be fixed. Your not good enough feeling, your feeling of unworthiness is something that was inherited throughout centuries of conditioning. And I think when women don't make it personal anymore, then there's a real liberation in that.
What beautiful medicine. Yeah, I'm really emotional as you say that. This is something I truly feel as well. And that's why I love to put us as the heroine, that we're on this heroic journey. Yeah. And there's things that we need to manage and change, of course, but that that underlying, as you say it, like you are not the problem, it's so deeply entrenched to us. And I think those of us that carry that unworthiness, I'm yet to meet a woman that really doesn't. It's so entrenched in us, isn't it, that we need to keep fixing, 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 fixing. And we're doing so much work around this that I love the idea that you go to where you say, I am already the archetype, I am the goddess, the heroine already lives in me. And there may be some little things I've got to work out while I'm in that archetype, as does the queen. The queen's not perfect at all. The queen has to work and figure things out. So does the priestess. And the Magdalene, she teaches us that. She has to go through her own initiations and sufferings and shadows. So it's this beautiful medicine you just gave our viewers in that, yeah, this is more about taking that heroic journey. It's more about feeling the things around us that we can move and change as we go on the hero's path. And I think that what you've just done is illustrated what I wanted to get out of these podcasts, where that women's stories offer a medicine. And I can imagine that on the other sides of you, when you're in your practice and doing your work, that this whole journey you've been through is so embodied, that wisdom that's coming through, I can feel it's so embodied that it's that prime medicine that will really help women along. We're not preaching from up here, we're meeting women, as I feel from you when I read everything about you. You're really meeting women at an embodied level and saying, hey, I've been through this, I've documented this, and I can really support you through it. And I think we're super good as women to do that for other women. And that leads me to the question that I really wanted to ask you. I've got many questions, and I knew that this one was for you. So you have a feminine power. We can feel that from what you've been saying. I can see that from the book that's coming out, the journey that you've done. And you've also got this not just feminine power, but you're allowing yourself to be visible. You're allowing that. So how has the relationship with your feminine power allowed you to become more visible?
How has it? Yeah. Um, well, I guess it relates back to what we were talking about, perfectionism, and being able to show up. When I show up now, it's very different because I can sink into my body and into my truth and let go a little bit more, not completely, but I can let go more of what others think about me, or what I'm saying, or how I'm showing up. And I believe that feminine power comes in experimenting with microdoses. Like being able, so as I'm, even as I'm, talking to you this morning, it's morning here, and as I'm getting ready, just very in a very practical way, there is the good girl will always, I think, be there. She'll be like, oh, I hope you, say the right things or whatever she says. I hope you show up, being able to, say what you really want to say. And so noticing that, and at the same time, being able to relax, and when she comes up, to take a breath and sit a little bit more in my body, feel my womb where I'm rooted. And when we make that shift from, the thought, the chatters of the good girl into the body, we start to feel safe enough to show up and be visible in those micro moments. Maybe for some of your listeners, it's in their kitchen when they're talking to their children. Maybe it's at work when you're talking to your boss or a colleague, or maybe it's with a friend that you find, draining, and you have to say, like, you have to set a boundary. So all those little moments, I think, start to add up, and you realize, I can do this and I can survive. I can show up in a podcast and I can survive. Even if it goes sideways and I don't, and I don't like what I said or whatever, it's all okay. That to me feels like power.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it's so important. I realized when studying myth that, like exactly as you say, it's happening in those micro moments, in those mundane moments, because that's how it happens for the goddesses and Rapunzel and Cinderella and all of those. There's not a big grand stage they're being asked to stand on. They're asked to speak up loud. They're asked to be partake in a conversation a little more where they might have felt afraid to. It's all of those places, isn't it? The real life, the mundane, where visibility begins to build momentum. I know that had to happen for me, being shut down as a child and then having to grow and grow and grow in visibility in the everyday world, not because we need to be a superstar or a singer or a celebrity or a spiritual teacher, but literally sat around the table with friends or, in everyday ways. So
Yeah,
from that,
that's a big.
what would you say that what does feminine sovereign being a sovereign feminine mean to how would you explain that, a woman who's sovereign? How would you feel and share what sovereignty is?
Mm-hmm. Colette, can you excuse me for 2 seconds? I just need to close something here. Sorry.
Real life, as we were saying, real life.
Yeah, this is real life. Sovereignty for me is choosing yourself in any given moment, choosing to stand in your feet, choosing to take a breath where you normally would shrink or tense, showing up to whatever the conversation is that you have been avoiding. It's really taking responsibility. And I don't mean that in a shaming way at all, but it's a massive, if it sounds massive, to take responsibility for your life right now. Right now, telling yourself, I am free to make decisions. I am free to make choices about how I want to feel, no matter what anybody else is doing or saying, or, if you're a people pleaser, like I have been, meeting everybody else's needs, to be able to say, I need to rest, or I'm sorry you've had a hard day, but not taking on the emotions of the people around you. So it's actually standing sovereign as your own tower, not walled off from the world, but actually protecting your own sovereignty. To be able to say, I like that and I don't like that. I'm not interested in coming to that party tonight because I'm tired or whatever it might be. But for me, it's a choice by choice, moment by moment experience. And soon enough, I want to tell your listeners too that it might sound really great to do that, but and it is, and you will get better at it with practice. But if you have a life built around a story that was not yours, you're going to lose people. You're going to have people not like this shift. You're going to feel guilty. And some people who have been benefiting, I want to say, from your people pleaser, they'll probably leave your life. So that's the other side of becoming, but the benefit on the other side of that, I promise you, is so much greater than your mind can even imagine. You can't see it when you're outside the tower wall. You're kind of peeking over going, oh, that looks kind of nice in there. Oh, what are they doing? But it's like, oh, once you climb over, you might fall a little bit, but you will rebuild from a different story, a different myth, and from being the author of how your life goes.
Writing your own myth. How spot on. So I want to ask you a last question before we talk a little bit about you and your offerings and how people can get in touch with you. But if you were going to bring a symbol through, so you're this beautiful, tower priestess, and this is the myth that you're living, and you've got a symbol. What symbol would you bring through your myth?
Mm. There's a few running through my mind. The first one that was coming up for me, I would say, a year or two or three ago, would be the rose with thorns. It had to be a rugosa rose, a very protective, delicate with thorns. The obvious one would be the tower, but energetically, for me, it's the lioness. That when I breathe life into her, into the white lion that started visiting me in my dreams, I just feel like I embody a voltage that feels very powerful, sovereign, loving, fierce, all of the things that the good girl wasn't. So that would be the one for me. Yeah, yeah.
And aren't all them images on your book cover?
Yes, that is
You've got the
where the
tower.
white
Yeah,
lion is there, because the white lions started, visiting me and have a very strong influence energetically in my life. And that's all on the book cover as well as the tower.
amazing. So tell us a little bit of how we can find you. Tell us something about this book that's coming out. I'm sure all our listeners are so interested to get their hands on this book, when it's coming out, and anything else you have to share with us.
Mhm. Yeah, probably the best way to connect. I mean, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I have a YouTube channel called Woman Fully Alive. I've had that for a number of years, and now I'm really talking more about Mary Magdalene's gospel, because it's a map, it's a roadmap for us to be fully alive, fully human, the anthropos that. I found a lot of peace and freedom in her gospel. So Woman Fully Alive. And my website is mindfullivingnow.com. And I really invite your readers to join my email list, because that's where I'll be sending updates and the book launch. The book is being released on August 4th. And so I will be posting about that. But I personally love the more personal contact of email. So that's
Yeah,
where people
definitely.
can find me. Hmm.
Yeah, I will make sure that your email address and the links to your YouTube and the links to your website are underneath the video. And then when the book is launched, I will also include the link to be able to purchase the book as well. But if they're on your email list, they will get that firsthand, won't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there'll be, pre-excerpts and bonuses for people that are on the email list as that's, really where my community is. And I'll be opening up, I'll be opening up a private offline community, a tower salon, where we will be secretly holding events and tower events and with our walls around us, and we'll be working our magic in there, leading up to the book launch. So I'll be talking about that on to my email list and sending invitations there to join me in a secret society of tower priestesses.
Sounds absolutely amazing. Do we all get to dress up as well?
Oh yes.
I'm like, I want to dress up. But it's been an absolutely wonderful conversation with you and very enlightening. I think there's so much medicine in what you've said for the past, while the time has gone so quick as well with you. There's so much medicine, and hopefully, our listeners will be using the interview sheet to pick out the medicine that they can really apply to their own lives. So, I'm really, really grateful for your wisdom, your embodied wisdom, and all that you've brought to this tonight and this morning for you. But I'm really, really happy to have invited you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this conversation. And I absolutely love the frame that you put around myth and archetypes and making the story of your life a conscious story. It's a beautiful way to approach this.
Thank you. And thank you all to the viewers who are tuning in and listen. And don't forget to hook up with Magdalene on her email list so you can be the first to hear when the book is launched. So good evening for now. Take care.
Thank you.